Good evening. I usually wait until about 5 minutes after as people come in up until about that time. I'm Freeman Allen with Sustainable Claremont, and this is number 76 in our series of sustainability dialogues, and we have a very exciting topic on how to integrate experience in the environment into improving teaching. This evening, I'm going to ask Peggy Kelly, who's on the Sustainable Claremont Board of Directors and represents the school's action group, to introduce our speaker. So, Peggy, you have to hurry up and get up here so you can do that. Oh, one other thing. We're videotaping the program this evening. So later on, when you have questions to ask, it would be helpful if you use this microphone, then we can get your voice recorded well. Thank you.
Thank you, Freeman. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. I know we've got quite a diverse audience, which is the point. We wanted people from the community, people from the education field, the whole community to come and pay attention to this topic. And as I was telling Jim Alsesser, we have a phenomenal speaker, and I don't know how we got him, but don't ask, you know. This is a nationally known individual in environmental education, Gerald Lieberman, and his wife, Gracie, who is, some say his better half, some say, you know. And Jerry is one of those people, like so many of you, who grew up in a family that exposed him to animals and plants and the outdoors, and he became an early lover of the plants and the animals and the environment. And his major in college and his PhD work, he did UCLA for undergraduate and Princeton. Yes. For his PhD work, and he studied kangaroo rats and all kinds of things. But in the process of his education, he did work in Costa Rica in the early 80s. In fact, developed with others the curriculum in environmental education in Costa Rica in 1981. And a complete curriculum, grades 1 through 12. So it kind of tells you how far behind we are at this point. Jerry is the person who's behind the Environmental Education Initiative. That is the curriculum that happens to be online in California and free for all educators. He spent 10 years with a group, well, it was 7, it felt like 10, developing this. And he's got a number of publications, 2 of my favorites, and I'm showing my bias here. One is Closing the Achievement Gap, Using Environment as an Integrating Context for Learning. Catch the phrase on the integrating context for learning. And Environment, Education and the Environment, Creating Standards-Based Programs in Schools and Districts. So for those of you who are educators, understand the pressure to comply with standards. And for those in your community, you know that the environment is really a hot topic now and critically important to us and for our kids. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Gerald Lieberman, who is your speaker for the evening. Thank you, Jerry.
Good evening. There is a wizard behind the curtain, so I have to make one quick shift. I guess it's just not me that's the wizard. Well, thank you all for coming. I'm here because I've been working in California. I met Ron, a year and a half ago at a conference, and we started talking about what was going on with Sustainable Claremont, and he shared a plan with me at that point, and we've talked several times since. So that's why I'm here. It's not a big mystery. What I want to talk to you about today, and my colleague Juanita Chan will be working with me as well. We're going to be talking about environment-based education in Rialto, and Juanita will share with you nearby district, the incredible things that they've been doing over the last several years. I want to talk about making science and history, social sciences real in the classroom through environment-based education strategies. I'm going to introduce you, unless you've heard of them, to California's environmental principles and concepts, which are an integral part of the new California History Social Science Framework and the new Science Framework. And they're required by the State Board of Ed to be in new published materials that'll be adopted over the next couple of years. And then as we close out, or before we close out, our hosts would like to have a conversation about what do these opportunities look like in Claremont. So, I'll be her mouse. Don't ask me what happened. This is my friend and colleague, Juanita Chan. Juanita is the science lead at Rialto Unified School District.
Okay,
I'm okay? You're okay? I'm not.
I'll use my teacher voice.
Okay.
So my name is Juanita Chan. I'm the science lead in Rialto Unified. Rialto Unified School District is not very far from here. It's about 20 minutes east of here. Our past was one of like hog farms and citrus in Rialto. We like to think of ourselves as a north-south city in an east-west world because we've got exactly 2 off-ramps on the 210 and on the 10, and so a lot of times when you're on your way to Palm Springs, you'll just pass us right up. So while that might have been our past, our future really is all about transportation, logistics, robotics, all those pieces. And as we start thinking about, about what those pieces bring to the community and what those pieces, how those pieces challenge the community, it's one of our ideas that environmental education is really a way to provide our students access and equity, our entire community access and equity to these elements of environmental justice, which are hugely important. So if you have never been to Rialto, we have a population of about 100,000 people, right? We service 30,000 students. And of those students, about 80% of them are low SES, which means that they qualify for free or reduced lunch. About 76% are Hispanic, and another around 13% are African American. So really, we're talking about the majority of our community being in the minority of the population just in general. And how does that kind of coincide with environmental education? The other piece is that I think Rialto is a beautiful place, but it's a chaparral. So a lot of times when people start thinking about environmental education, they think about beautiful scenic landscapes of, like mountains and forests and oceans, and we have low-growing shrubs and tall grasses. We've got some endangered species, right? The kangaroo rat and the desert sands fly, and none of those sound all that exciting. It's not like we can boast like eagles and all kinds of great stuff, but they're still hugely important, and they're a huge piece of what we want our kids to understand. And so as Rialto Unified started thinking about environmental education, we had to think about what components of the environment are we really trying to stress to the kids? What are we trying to tell the kids are important just in general? And so it caused us to have to dig a little deeper about our community and figure out what was there. So we focused on a few things. One of them was we focused on this idea of water quality and sustainability, water conservation, quality, sustainability. And that's because as we were looking at our community, we discovered that we had an aquifer that was contaminated with perchlorate because the federal government had done some weapons testing in our area, in our history, and so that had contaminated an aquifer. And we worked with the city, and we worked with the water districts, all the water districts, to talk about what it was exactly that they were doing. And we built in these project-based learning units of instruction, both for teachers And then we had those teachers talk about how they could build it in for their students as well. Because if you want to make long-term sustainable change, we figure the best place to start with that is with the kids. They take it home, and that's how we get it into the community. So if you can go back to the slide before, that conversation about water quality and sustainability led to a couple of different conversations in the community. So one, of course, was the quality piece, and we dug really deep into that. The other one was the conservation kind of piece. So how are we using our water wisely? And what we ended up doing was we got our maintenance and operations director really excited about these project-based learning units by having him come into the classroom and hear the different solutions that the kids had about how they could save water. He got so inspired, in fact, that he also applied for a variety of different grants. And he received a lot of grants, over $150,000 worth of grants. And what he did with that grant money was he helped us to put in all of these gardens and groves. So we have 19 elementary schools, we've got 5 middle schools, we've got 3 comprehensive high schools, and 1 continuation high school. In our 19 elementary schools, all of them now have gardens and groves. So they all have groves of various sorts, citrus groves. We call them heritage citrus groves because that is our past. And then the garden here. So if you're looking in this picture, this lady in the middle, this is the mayor of Rialto, Mayor Robertson, and this is Kelly Elementary School. And Kelly Elementary School is interesting for a couple of reasons. First off, this teacher right here, her name is Sue Dix. She really got passionate about this project through our California Math and Science Partnership Grant, so through our teacher professional development. And she went out and she garnered a whole bunch of additional support in order to put in these boxes for vegetables. And they had just, right before this, they had just had their first harvest of all these different vegetables. And so we had a water challenge actually right now. We're in the middle of a water pledge challenge from the Wildland Foundation in the community. And the kids are leading that charge in the community. So it's been really exciting. That's our superintendent, Dr. Cuauhtemoc Avila, and a school board member back there as well. So water quality is one piece that we've been really passionate about. And along with that garden growth project, so that's what it looked like beforehand. It was all grass before, so they took that out. The other piece that we highlighted was we have a community garden. So the kids and most of the people in the community didn't even know we had a community garden. So we took the kids there, and we actually did a curiosity quest, which is a show that comes on PBS, where also they highlight this teaching method of project-based learning. And we gave the kids a task, and the task that they had to come up with was, how could we have the highest yield of fresh fruits and vegetables to donate to the senior center from one plot at the community garden. And so we partnered with them in order to work with community members that were experts at gardening, and then the kids went in and they filled out one of those plots full of fruits and vegetables, and then we collected those, and through Family Services Association, we distributed them to the seniors at the senior center. Another thing is that we garnered some additional partnerships. So it's hard for schools and districts to do this on their own. We would love to say that everyone has the expertise in order to have a really strong environmental ed program, but what we discovered was it really helps when you bring in people from the community as well. And so one of the groups that we brought in was Veolia North America, right up here, and then we created something called the Gen STEM program, so Generation STEM. And Veolia is a contracted service provider for Rialto Water Service. And so here what we do is we have a 5th grade water day where the water technicians come out and they teach kids about aquifers, they teach them about mathematical modeling, and then we also have a conservation component. We've built this component in at elementary school, at middle school, and at high school. Veolia also gives out specialty awards at the science fair to kind of promote that kind of thinking as students are exploring their own interests. And then at high school, we wrote a whole set of integrated next generation science standards courses. And those courses prepare students not only for college, but they also prepare them for careers in the water industry, so water technician careers, so they prepare students to take the California water boards as well. Everybody's really excited about those courses, us ourselves included, because they are there. Have you ever tried to make changes at high school? High school's kind of been done the same way for like 70 years, 100 years, 150 years, and this is our first real attempt at like trying something new and really different. We have, along with water, we've also tried to, we also have a surface quarry in our particular area. So if you've been on a freeway recently, most of that freeway was mined right in Rialto, because what they mine in our community is are the materials, the raw materials that it takes to make concrete. So we had students explore things like soil porosity and permeability as it related to the gardens, but we also had them explore what kind of rocks and minerals it was that they would be able to find outside. And we did a whole set of urban development project-based learning units, and those urban development project-based learning pieces asked students to create things like bricks, build little houses out of them, and then talk about thermal energy transfer and what are some strategies that might help with thermal energy transfer. And those were projects that were done at the 5th grade, they were done at the 6th grade, excuse me, and they're being done in the high school environmental science class too, which we're also super proud of. We created this new environmental science class at the high school that's another integrated science class. And it is traditionally only for AP students, AP environmental science, but we wrote it and got it UC approved so that it's a P-level environmental science, which means that all students can take it. So again, going back to that access and equity piece. We have tried to, so just like the EEI units, we've also tried to incorporate bits of like intersection points, because that's really important. Schools don't have a lot of time. We haven't added any new minutes in the day, but we've added lots of new standards to cover. So we're trying to figure out how to take project-based learning and really create rich, robust lessons. So this one is, we have a culinary institute at the high school. And so these are 4th graders with their teacher, Mr. Emmerich. And they did a Healthy Rialto connected unit that also talked about ancient societies, so ancient versus modern societies. They looked at the 3 sisters, the Native American tale of the 3 sisters, beans, corn, and squash. And they grew those things in their garden, and then they were harvesting seeds here. And of course, as they were harvesting seeds, they also another section of this field trip was them making a stew out of what they created, like a healthy stew. And then they made corn husk dolls to go along with that. So it wrapped right in with California history as well as with the gardening and healthy eating and a healthy lifestyle, because we have a large population of people that have both type 2 diabetes and hypertension. And so these are the pictures of those bricks that I was telling you about, another elementary school class here at Fitzgerald. And in addition to that, we have partnered, so like I was saying about having those partnerships being hugely important, we've partnered with the surface quarry. So CMEX runs our surface quarry, and so surface quarries are usually pretty dangerous places, and so they don't let people into the quarry most of the time, but we work with them, and they are now running this annual Run Around the Rocks. It's a 5K run, and students and their families are invited to go out and run through the surface quarry, see what kinds of stuff actually happens there. It was really exciting. So this is our 2nd year of doing this. And the exciting part was that the kids that lived right across the street from the quarry, I don't know how many moms and dads says, I've lived over there for 15 years, and I had no idea that this place was so big or what they did over here at all, because from the street it just looks like a field. But when you go in, it's amazing in there. It's so exciting. And so the kids were excited their huge trucks, so they got to see those huge trucks. We worked with them this year, so last year was our first year doing it. We worked with them this year so that they also included some rock and mineral kind of exhibits to get the kids excited about rocks and minerals. The Orange Belt Mineralogical Society set up a booth, so it was a lot more informational this year. And on top of that, anybody who signed up and registered for the run, they donated all those funds to the Rialto STEM program. So it was a great community event. And so how do you make sure that these things have staying power? Well, one of the ways that you make sure that they have staying power is that you actually write it into the curriculum. So a lot of times when people think about STEM or they think about environmental education, it's something that's extra. We're going to do this. This is what we have to teach. And then if we have extra time, then we can do this over here. We don't want that to happen because that's how things fall to the wayside. So what we did was we built it in to our next generation science standards transition and implementation. And the way that we did that was through our three-dimensional scope and sequences that explore phenomena. We use the environment in order to find phenomena that was relevant for students. And then also, we replaced all of our tests that happened during second trimester, the writing tests, which we call benchmark tests, with science common labs. And those common labs asked for students to go outside and to actually do some science. And they're little things and it starts all the way down in kindergarten. So little things like thermal energy, which has come up over and over. It's a next generation science standard performance expectation. And so here's an example of a kindergarten one. So the kindergartners, interestingly enough, their common lab is called Hot, Hot, Hot. And so the performance expectation says students are supposed to design a device that reduces the warming impacts, the warming of the sun. Warming impacts of the sun. And so that sounds really hard. And especially when you say to kindergarten teachers that that's what they're going to do, they said, no, no, no way. But really, it's not that hard. We asked the kindergartners to go outside and to melt an ice cube and to talk about why do you think that ice cube melted? Sun and energy, of course. And then see if they could design something that could keep their ice cube from melting so quickly. Right? And so this is one of the systems drawings of our kindergartners. And I don't know if any of you read kinder, but of course there's the sun up here. Here's the device that the student has created. They were supposed to do their system. Does anybody know what that says? For instance. For instance. That's kinder for instance, which is amazing because we have this huge population of English language learners, and here you've got like 5-year-olds saying, for instance, that people think, what? They're not going to come up with that. The other thing is also in kinder, dictation is a reasonable means of measurement, and so we also we broadened our scope a little bit, and we said, okay, if in 21st century learning we're not just focused so much on just writing, but communication as a whole, then maybe there's a place in here where students don't have to write everything, they could also speak, right? And so here, talk to your teacher, did your structure work? Yes, because when I looked at my ice, it wasn't melted, I engineered, so it was covered and didn't melt. So again, that expert vocabulary, bringing that language way up and getting the kids to go outside, and it was so exciting. It was so exciting for us. We've done all this work, and just recently we found out that we were awarded the Green Ribbon Schools Award, so we got a gold. Gold ribbon as a district for the work that our district has been doing with the environment, and it's been really exciting. And I was a little bit late because I was meeting with my boss about planning something, the presentation for this event. So, ironically enough, so I guess the biggest piece is that it can be done. It's so exciting when it is being done. The kids are excited. They are going outside. They're learning things. They're interested. But it can't be done really in isolation, by ourselves. What we learned through this whole process really is that it takes a whole community to make the community more aware about their environment and about the beauty of their environment, the know, nature and the wonder that surrounds them every day that they kind of take for granted. And so I'm really thankful to be able to at least share that bit this evening.
Well, I think you can see why I asked Juanita. I turned it on. It takes time to wake up. I think you can see why I asked Juanita to join us tonight. She has been doing incredible work. Juanita was one of the members of the Curriculum Frameworks Committee for Science, so she was actively involved in the development of the new science framework. And about 2 years ago, was it 2 years ago, she sent me this high school course that she had been developing and asked me to look at it, and it's just incredible because she took the complexity of high school science in the next generation science standards, put it together in a 3-year sequence that makes it interesting based on water, as she said, and connected it to careers. So it really gave the students an opportunity to pursue something that would interest them. So thank you. And she's been working all day, and she's still got energy. I don't know how she does that. So a big part of the next generation science standards, and I'm going to talk about the next generation science standards. I'm also going to talk about the new history social science framework. The standards are the same as the 1998 history social science standards, but the framework is brand new and represents a major shift in thinking about how instruction should be done in history and social sciences as well. So we've got 2 major new frames that are now going to be driving instruction in California. And with both of them, they established not just guidance to teachers about how to do this instruction, but also give the publishers of instructional materials specific guidance and requirements of what they have to do to meet these new goals of instruction.
You are about to see 3 schools using the environment as an integrating context for learning.
We just learned about all sorts of different things, like systems, everything is connected to everything else, the earth, the environment.
Well, we use our math skills along with science, being out in nature.
It like teaches you teamwork and how to work with other people.
You know, to get up and work with friends and experience your assignment.
I just wanted to show you that to give you a little flavor. Now, the boy that was on there, just the oldest one, who is the high school student, if I showed you the whole video, you'd be blown away because he said, I want to be a race car driver. Well, but by the end of that year of programming based on the environment, he wanted to do more than become a race car driver. He knew how to work with other students. He knew how to ask good questions. And it was because that was an incredible integrated program at that high school that brought together science and English language arts and math and gave them a real chance to do real things. You can see some other students from that class out measuring the quality of water in the river. So let me start with the next generation science standards. If you're not familiar with it, the State Board of Education back in 2013 adopted a new set of science standards for the state. These were developed as a cooperative endeavor by 26 state departments of education across the country. If you aren't aware of it, there is no such thing as national standards. Standards are set by states and in fact adopted in California by school districts. So what's one of the really important things that the framework and that the goals of the next generation science standards make science real and relevant to the students' lives? So what you heard Juanita talking about was one of her multitude of strategies for making it real and relevant to those students, which we know is good pedagogy, if nothing else. So the California Next Generation Science Standard is meant to be relevant to local communities and student interests, built on skills and content their existing experience, and look at this. This is a shift in science education. We want them to learn about solving real-world problems. And we know that that's got to be focused on the goals of the students and their needs, but equally important on their community. So it's crucial that in the education system, if you're implementing the next generation science standards and the new framework well, the students have an opportunity to do real-world investigations in their communities. An important section of the framework from my perspective, and it's what I worked on with the framework, was tying in the environmental concepts that were developed by the state of California several years ago. We call them the environmental principles and concepts. And so in the instructional strategies and the overview for the framework, it calls on students to explore real-world phenomena, real things that are going on, through outdoor and environmental learning experiences. Participating in problem-based learning experiences like the ones Juanita was talking about, analyzing those California's environmental principles and concepts, and I'll share them with you in a few minutes, and then very integral to these new science standards and the new framework is students actually doing engineering work like what Juanita was talking about so that they're applying what they're learning to a real-world problem. A big shift that occurred really in the last 6 months of the development of the framework was when the State Board of Education agreed to include in the Instructional Strategies chapter outdoor and environmental learning experiences for implementing the NGSS and those environmental principles and concepts. That's a major shift. Engaging students in investigations of the world around them, learning to solve those real-world problems like water and air quality, habitat restoration, pollution, energy consumption, waste reduction. And again, as I mentioned before, being able to apply what they're learning in school, because this is how we engage them, being able to apply what they're learning to their everyday lives and to their futures. Those are some of the big shifts in the next generation science standards and the way science instruction is to be done in California. Equally, there are important shifts that took place in the history social sciences framework. Here, even at the early grades, in kindergarten through 5th grade, we expect students to be able to explain weather, climate, and other environmental characteristics, but as well as human-made and natural disasters, as well as how they affect people's lives. 6th through 8th grade, we're looking at analyzing the relationships between humans and their environment and human-induced environmental changes. And at high school, we want students to be able to explain how current globalization trends affect policies like economic growth, labor market, rights of citizens, the environment, and resource and income distribution in different nations. So you can see these connections, the opportunities for integration between science and history, social science, and the environment. And the reason that happens is because the environment is such a rich place to do those things. Juanita shared with you some of the writing examples. You could find equally math examples, science, history, social science, and art. The framework for history, social science goes further. It sees the environment as one of its 6 key themes. Again, it requires the incorporation of the environmental principles and concepts into the instructional materials. It identifies connections between those EP&Cs and the standards, and it gives an overview of the EEI curriculum. I'll show you a couple of those later on. But that was the curriculum that Peggy mentioned that we developed between 2004 and 2010, adopted by the State Board of Education, that they approved as teaching the standards in history, social science to mastery, and now we're adapting some of those to use with the new science standards.
Civic engagement has to be taught explicitly, and that's a big challenge because sometimes our students now don't see the context of why it is important, but it permeates every part of our society.
Brawley Union High School in Imperial County is a model when it comes to teaching students about civic engagement. For his efforts, Flores was recognized by federal education officials in Washington, D.C., where he received a Presidential Environmental Education Award.
My passion for environmental education derives from engaging students in relevant phenomena within their community.
Back in Brawley, Flores often takes students on field trips to places like the city council chambers to meet local officials face to face.
As lifelong residents and as new residents to Brawley, we want the best for you and for the city of Brawley.
It's getting away from just textbook learning and providing students with an opportunity to see what's happening in the real world.
Or Mr. Mayor, why don't we ask them a question? Just by raise of hands, how many of you are going to college? You're seniors now, how many of you are going to college?
School administrators encouraged Flores to expand his civics education classes to the outside world from the very start.
I said, this is what I want you to do. I want you to do away with traditional instruction. I don't want to see textbooks. I want to see you interacting with the students. I want them involved. I want them engaged. I want them out in the community. And he was like, I'm ready. Let's do this.
These activities, these opportunities, gives them a voice in the community. Those are the things that open their eyes to how democracy works, and it brings them home.
Obviously, a lot of you are very knowledgeable in terms of what air pollution is.
For other field trips, Flores finds experts to talk about controversial issues in the region. Students here are being briefed on pollution problems at the Salton Sea, about 20 miles north of Brawley.
The state of California said in the water transfer agreement that they would restore the Salton Sea. And today we haven't seen any progress with.
Is that our community is becoming a more informed and engaged community.
Brawley's efforts to immerse students in current events goes beyond the civics class. There's also a popular civics club with more than 100 members. It was originally created to help Spanish-speaking students learn English, but now has a much broader mission.
So now it's a whole movement across our campus where everybody's involved in this whole civics movement.
Right, so obviously, are you 18 years old?
Yeah.
You're going to be 18?
Yeah.
So when you are 18, are you going to register to vote?
Yes.
Back in his classroom, Jose Flores gives his seniors one further assignment, one he hopes they will covet for the rest of their lives. He has them register to vote.
We make a strong push to engage and show them the correlation that they have to have a voice, whether they, again, win an election or lose an election, for whoever they support, they have to have a voice in that election process.
So in case you're wondering about people like Jose and people like Juanita, I told you Juanita worked on the science curriculum framework. Jose is a member of the Instructional Quality Commission, which supports the development of all the frameworks. He's obviously deeply engaged in the history social sciences. And in fact, next week, the process of reviewing instructional materials based on the new framework starts. It'll go on for the next several months, but it starts next week. And so you should be seeing the environmental principles and ideas about the environment built into textbooks. So what are these environmental principles that I keep talking about, and where did they come from? California is an incredibly rich and diverse state. We have what the California Department of Fish and Game identifies as over 200 distinct ecosystems in our state. They go from the terrestrial, the deserts, the mountains, the coast, and the ocean. Of course, California's natural systems provide us with everything we need to survive. Everything we need and use on a daily basis ultimately comes from one of the natural systems in California or somewhere else. What about these environmental principles and why did they come on? Well, back in 2003, the legislature determined that it was important that students begin to learn about their connection and dependence on the environment. So you can look at this map The dark areas are the areas with the highest human impact. Not surprising, we see it in the Bay Area, we see it in the Central Valley, around Stockton, Sacramento, Monterey Bay Area, Fresno. These are all areas that are highly impacted by humans. On the other hand, if we look for those areas that are one of the lightest greens, the places in California where there has been little impact, note that they're all in the mountain ranges, at the tops of the mountains or in the high valleys. So we've had a tremendous impact on our state, and it was because of that that the legislature decided that there was a need to develop environmental principles and concepts which the state would then incorporate with its standards in the frameworks and into the adoption of instructional materials. And as Peggy mentioned and I mentioned, the Education in the Environment Initiative curriculum was developed we finished back in 2010 with the purpose of providing teachers with a model curriculum for doing that. So, what are the environmental principles and concepts? Well, I'm going to give you about 5, 10, 15 seconds to look at each of these questions and think about them. And then I'll share with you what the principle that's related to that, because they're all really driven by these big questions. How do people, how do our societies and culture, all of our behaviors depend on healthy natural systems? Just think about it. Any thoughts? Come on, somebody has a thought out there. Air, water, all of those things. Soil, trees, plants. So environmental principle 1 is about that. The continuation and health of individual human lives and of human communities and societies depend on the health of the natural systems that provide essential goods and ecosystem services. Now, if you think about this from the perspective of an economist, you'd say, oh, goods and services, that's key to our economy. Well, guess what? Ecosystem goods and services are key to our survival. Next question. How do humans influence natural systems? What? We use them. So how does that affect them? We might pollute them. I'm sorry. Erosion, soil erosion. So there are many different ways we might affect natural systems. So principle 2. Notice it's not the inverse of principle 1 because, of course, natural systems don't depend on us, but their long-term functioning and health is influenced by their relationship with human societies. Third question for you. How do natural systems and humans depend on natural cycles, and how do human activities influence those cycles? What cycles do you depend on every day? Water cycle? Air cycle, carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, all those things that provide the food we eat depend on all of those systems and cycles. So what's important for students to understand? That those natural systems proceed through cycles. And it's not just that. We don't just want them to know about the water cycle. We want them to know how humans depend on it, and the inverse of that, how do we affect it? We need students to see both sides. In what ways do we depend on, and in what ways do we influence as people those natural systems? Question 4. How does matter that moves between natural and human systems affect both? How about a couple of examples of that? Waste. Any others? Air pollution. That's about particulate matter produced by humans, ending up in the air system. And of course, oh, all right. So it's important that our students understand that the movement of matter between natural systems and human societies affects the functioning of both. Another way to think about this is there are no impermeable boundaries. There's, as I think a lot of you are old enough to remember when we all used to say there's no away. There is no away. Last question for you. How and why do decisions affecting natural systems involve many factors and complexities? What are some of the factors that we take into account or should take into account when we're making decisions about how we use natural resources, how we affect natural resources, how we make those decisions? What are some of the factors you can think about?
Seasonal changes.
Okay.
Something that might be economically important might work against nature.
Okay, economics.
And one that's almost never talked about, and that's population.
Okay.
Deforestation.
So decisions we make about how we're using a forest with your example, population decisions, all of these different factors influence our decisions, economics, influence our decisions about how we use, how we manage, how we regulate the use of natural systems. So decisions affecting natural resources and natural systems are based on a wide range of considerations. So those are the 5 principles. There are 15 concepts under them all. Doesn't matter right now. Those are the 5 principles, and I've got a handout that'll give you those if you'd like them. That's what we've been working to integrate into the science framework and the history social science framework. And the big new news, because it's starting in about 6 weeks, is going to be the health framework, which is just starting. So Juanita talked about some of the environmental health, environmental justice, social justice issues. Those will be the ones we'll be working to get into the new science framework, history. Let me try that again. I'm stuck on history and science. Into the new health framework. Where does this all stand? Well, if you don't come away with anything else from this, there are opportunities here. There are instructional opportunities because this is a way to make this better for students. There are instructional opportunities because these environmental ideas are going to be built into the science and history, social science. In fact, there was a blueprint for environmental literacy released in fall of 2015. So this is Superintendent Torlikson's view of the role of environmental literacy in the K-12 education system. Supporting student environmental literacy supports and reinforces the California standards. That's one of the reasons between his views on this, the State Board of Education's views on this, and the State Department of Education's views on this. So there is a major commitment going on as we speak to bring this more deeply into our K-12 system. So any questions, or I'm going to start asking you questions. That would be easier, wouldn't it? Yes? Oh.
I just wanted to, am I on? Yes, I guess I am. I'd just like to drill down a little bit on, and I think Juanita may be able to address this as well. I know enough about teaching to know that, for example, in the past we have focused on certain concepts in mathematics. And when you try to overlay those concepts on a new curriculum, it takes a certain amount of time to sort of place those concepts in pieces that have environmental issues and so forth. And it also now challenges you in terms of following through on these mathematical concepts, making sure that they reinforce one another, even though they're sort of embedded in other projects. Can you tell us, I mean, what's the challenge there? Is it as bad as I think it is, or as good as I think it is, in terms of, you know, making it all work together?
You can talk about that one.
So yeah, I think that it's as bad as you're thinking. It's a very difficult task. And what happens is if you get too many differing, all of a sudden little buzz pieces, then it also gets very fragmented. And so I think that is one of the benefits of, like Dr. Lieberman is doing, is infusing those ideas into the science framework, into the history social science framework, into the health framework. And in our district, we're essentially trying to do that same thing through project-based learning and allowing that one phenomenon to be the exploration piece so that teachers and students can see, like you're saying, that the math links up to it, the science links up to it, the ELD instruction links up to it, the ELA instruction. So ELD is English language development for our non-English speakers, and English language arts development. It all leads up, but that the environment is such a rich concept, and it's ever growing and morphing to be even more interesting, because as you start with it in one area, so like we did, we started with it in this like really weird like perchlorate aquifer contamination piece, and it just kind of blossomed into this, oh, now we're talking about gardens, and now our gardens also lead into our like physical education standards of just like more healthy living and nutrition and exercise and all those pieces, and that there are these multiple entry and exit points for students. I think that if you really focus on that complexity, that complexity is the beauty of like environmental ed just in general, is that you can take those complex topics, you can break them down for kids, and there's multiple entry and exit points, regardless of the grade level, regardless of student interest. There's always something to keep the kids engaged. And because there's not funds to go out on field trips every single day, by being able to keep that focus also local, then you have this added benefit of just, instead of, oh, we would do that if we could go over here, but it's rather, well, we're going to go outside. So yeah, it's super hard.
But it's got all of those benefits, because if you think about it separately, you're in trouble. If you think about it as a way to integrate all of these different aspects of content, it's magical.
Jerry, can you piggyback on this gentleman's question about it being so bad to look at professional development? The teachers aren't in this alone and can't be done separately. But all the different things that we're talking about for getting to the sustainability and the education and the overlaying of the concepts you're talking about, the teachers need help. They need the professional They need the professional development. So I look at it as, is it bad? But I've been doing this for 40 years, and really, because it's so exciting, as Juanita's saying, as I work with teachers who are doing this today, every day they're a little less scared because they have some help. They have some help in seeing, you know, how do I develop this? How do I not be afraid? How can I do assessment that matters? How can I have the students make a difference in their communities, because that community becomes theirs? So I think your question was great. It is scary. Is it bleak? I look at it, the light at the end of the tunnel, and I think when we get there, it's going to be fantastic.
Yes. Okay.
I'm curious about what kinds of organizations other than schools that you think are important to work with or leverage in a community, just to get that community involvement behind it.
Thanks for bringing that up. Community resources are crucial to this for several reasons. One, we're now starting to get teachers, the goal of NGSS is science for all students, students doing science, not students reading about it. So we all know that over the last 10 years, roughly, teachers at the elementary grades, most of them haven't really been teaching science. That's been put to the side when we had No Child Left Behind and the only things measured were English language arts and math. Well, that shift is also occurring. The State Board of Education decided to, I'll get to your question, but it's tied. The State Board of Education decided that there would be 3 focal points for the state assessments: English language arts, math, and science. But that doesn't mean the teachers aren't still uncomfortable. So the community partners are critical. There are businesses, there are universities. There's a whole nother group that we often don't take into account, but we've been working with in several places around California is non-formal science or informal science institutions and environmental institutions, nature centers, museums, organizations that have the technical expertise from the science or environmental or history perspective, but may or may not actually have the instructional expertise. So that it has to go both directions. But bringing those community partners is just incredibly important. A charter school we work with in Pennsylvania has 50 community partners.
Can I share some of our community partners? So our community partners are obviously like, are the city of Rialto, so the mayor is a great partner. Local community groups, as funny as it sounds, like the Kiwanis Club. The Kiwanis Club is one of our community partners, and because they have a 501c3, they help us with some of the funding bits that we're not really able to do with our local control accountability plan. We are also partners. We have big public-private partnerships. So Veolia North America is a private partner that is a contracted service provider for the Rialto Water Service, which is a public partner. And that public partner also helped us to get other utility agencies, which are other public partners, like West Valley Water District is one. And West Valley has a non-formal partner, the Inland Empire Resources Council, that's now a partner of ours. Burtech Waste Industries is a partner. We built partnerships with CEMEX, the local farmers market people, the people inside the farmers market that come, they're partners. Amazon, so we have all these logistics centers coming up, and so we're reaching out to those as partners as well. But I can't reiterate enough how important those partnerships are, because each one of them bring a different perspective. And they bring a new voice to the conversation, whether it be for funding, whether it be for expertise, whether it be just a different interest level in that particular product. And the challenge with those partners typically is that everybody is speaking a completely different language. So the private industries, they're not really caring about the same things that we are. And so you have to finesse it, you have to listen to those. As well as not only our Cal State San Bernardino, we've got partners with them, Valley College, I forgot to mention them, UC Riverside, and Cal Poly Pomona.
Could you just go a little bit deeper on what these partnerships look like for the curriculum or for the learning process? How, I heard you mention funding for some, but what what might partnerships look like?
Yeah, so the partnerships look,
So I think for the partnerships, one of the pieces is that entry point piece. People want to be a part of something that's successful, but they don't necessarily want to be the first person that's the startup person for that. So we typically start out with our partnerships just having a conversation about what their goals are and then aligning those goals. So some of our partners come in as they provide us guest speakers. Some partners provide us some expertise for teacher professional development. So sometimes they're not actually able to come out. They can give us documents that will help us in our professional development. For example, like the Rialto Public Works gave us the documents that went along with the environmental impact surveys for the creation of the freeway and things like that, that teachers wouldn't normally have access to. They also, sometimes they come in and they help us to provide professional development. So Burtech, they actually brought in their education outreach person, and she came in and she helped to do professional development to the teachers. Sometimes they provide opportunities for students. So like Veolia, they bring their technicians out and they work directly with the kids. Sometimes they provide funding. That funding can be sticky sometimes, because if you talk about public partners typically can't give funding because they're working with tax dollars. Private partners are the only ones that can give those tax dollars, and even those private partners that might want to encourage students to do something, there was a difficult time trying to figure out how do you provide monetary prizes for kids for the art fair or for the science fair or something like that. And that's where the Kiwanis Club comes in. So the Kiwanis Club helps us to be able to acknowledge the students that have done a really outstanding job by they provide the actual scholarships, let's just say, for the kids. And we provide scholarships for community college and regular college, and we wouldn't be able to do that without those partners. So they're all over the map, and I don't know. Oh, and field trips. So the other piece is like they help us to plan field trips, and then they also help us to provide new partners. So they help to build this network of people that, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to help this year, but I know this lady over here, and she might be able to help you. And so they provide that. And teacher externships and student internships as well. So it's all a networking thing.
And there is actually money with some of them if you're lucky. The Department of Water Resources has some new grants that they've just sent out applications to do shifts in the campus for schools that have lots of asphalt, which results in runoff problems, and they are willing to give grants to help make those shifts. But they aren't just going to make a shift so you can dig up your asphalt either. They want it to be connected to education as well.
I'm not really sure how, is that too loud? How relevant this is, because it's from a entirely different culture. But of the years we spent in Chile, the last 12 years we were asked to create an agricultural school up in the Andes for Aymara Indian youth. And of course the first thing we did, it took most of the first year, was to do an extensive study of interviewing rural farmers, rural teachers, government officials, university, people who had relationship to the rural areas, all of that. And once, to skip way ahead, once we had the school built and established, we had to determine the curriculum. There was an established government curriculum that we were obligated to follow, but we were able to modify that with the approval of the Ministry of Education. And for example, give a very simple example, in the math class, we would have the students calculate if you have to sow so many seeds per 100 square meters, how many seeds would you need to for a hectare of land? Or if you had a very simple one, if you had 10 llamas in a corral and you took one out, how many are left? I mean, that sort of thing, trying to relate the subject. Well, in history and geography, there was required course, but we also included the history of the Aymara people, which practically is missing from the government program. Music, we made sure that we had classes in music and native dances, and in their artifacts, weaving and all those sorts of things. So we tried to make it relevant to these kids so it'd be meaningful to them, as well as trying to comply with the government required courses and materials.
There's another really great group, and because you brought up the interviewing community members there, which is community members getting information, and I don't mean as partners, I mean as sources for information. I don't know, I think it was Peggy I said, when I was a kid, when I moved out here in '65, we used to go out to West Covina to catch lizards. Remember, there used to be orange trees there? But that's all missing. I don't mean the orange trees, I mean that information. So community members are valuable resources who can be brought in.
Are you finding any significant opposition to this kind of integration of these concepts and principles in education? So far, it sounds like there's almost widespread positive support.
There is the last several years, actually. It's been very positive. I tell people when I'm up in Sacramento pretty often, wait, this is very odd. I'm used to having a battle. And there's been a tremendous shift. When we started working on the Education and the Environment Initiative, I had a meeting with the executive director of the State Board of Education, so that must have been in 2004. And I walked into her office, and I think it was 5 minutes in, she said, you know, Jerry, I hate this law. And by the time we got done with the EEI curriculum, which is environment-based, she was on the state board, and here's the shift that she went through. And I would say this is paralleled in what I'm seeing up in Sacramento with the state level administration on education. By the time we got the curriculum done, she was on the state board, and she said, I've got to make the motion to approve this curriculum because I was against it in the beginning and I believe in it now. That was just incredible as far as I was concerned. But, so the battles have diminished, actually. There seems to be strong support there's definitely strong support with the superintendent and the state board and the Instructional Quality Commission and the framework committees over the last couple of years. So it's been fantastic. It's not going to last forever. But I think the reason that's true is because this isn't about you didn't hear us talking about cranking out wacko environmentalists. This is about doing quality education.
I think really one of the marvelous things we're seeing tonight and what you're suggesting is a paradigm shift that can make teaching and learning, I think, more interesting and relevant. It's not just about reading and regurgitating information, which has, I think, too long been a central paradigm of our education. It's more about nurturing creative thinking, kind of like breathing in and breathing out, taking information in, but then applying it, which I think is very important, particularly when we see so much analysis paralysis, particularly in academic communities. It's about applying knowledge to solve problems. And I think that's central here to what you're doing, which makes it all the more important. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Well, there's one sentence whenever I talk to people about the next generation science standards, and it's really the way there's been a shift in the thinking about teaching history, social sciences as well. It's about the next generation science standards. California science education is about students doing science, not reading about science, which is exactly what you're talking about. So it's a major shift in instruction, and it's not going to happen instantly at all. It's going to take a process and time.
Jerry, so much of this is about community partnerships, right? And that's one thing that Juanita's talking about too. My question is for either one of you, you've got the ball rolling now, it's wonderful, but who gets it started? Who actually does this, forms the partnerships, gets the partnerships going? Under what authority do you do it? Where do you get the time and the money and so on? What are the logistics of this? Okay?
I think it's the people in this room, because Juanita and I are going home. She's heading east, and I've got a meeting at Northridge tomorrow. So it's the people in this room.
But how did they do it? How did they do it in Rialto?
So.
How did you get started?
So we got started in Rialto. So who was doing all this work? It was me. and so I was really blessed to have this opportunity because our district received a California Math and Science Partnership Grant. And so it was through that partnership grant that we started some of those partnership pieces, and it just kind of blossomed and grew from there. I know that there are some advocates that are out that are trying to help to support that, like with Creek and with SB 424, and so we're hoping that that more people can become inspired to do the work. But you're right, it takes someone in the educational community or setting to kind of.
So were you doing this on your own as a science teacher, or did you have some sort of district direction or community direction? Where did the authority come from
So,
for you to do this?
Yeah, so my direction was that we had this California Math and Science Partnership Grant, and they wanted us to focus on project-based learning. And so I went out to figure out what were the projects supposed to be, and so that was the only authority that I was given. So I'm a teacher on special assignment, and so that special assignment is just figure out what we're doing. That was our special assignment. And so it was a lot of me like going to like neighborhood watch meetings, and like I'm a Kawanian now because I went to the meetings and tried to figure out what was going on, and I really tried to infuse myself into the community and how that fit. There was a lot of support at the district level. So the associate superintendent, the superintendent was supportive, and I think that one of the reasons that in our district they had that support was because we had this extra funding. And so I would go to the board meetings and I would explain what it was that we were doing, and then just bit by bit, it just kind of started snowballing. In our project, we started off with 63 teachers that were participating teachers in our project. And because of the way that the grant was written, we couldn't add teachers, but at this point, we're still in the high 50s because the teachers just really saw the power in what it was that we were doing. And it's led to like policy and procedural change in our entire district. Those water courses were not the outcome of the grant. They were extra.
Extra Juanita. You know, Yep, we can, one sec, because I want to go back to Ron's question for just a second. So Ron, I've seen it start in every possible way you could think about it. Teachers, parents, principals, district people, I've seen it all. And it doesn't especially have to start with money, it has to start with starting. And there are lots of ways to do that. And I think one of the critical things that Juanita's brought up, she mentioned this regarding the partners, is having that conversation about what do they think, what do they need, what language do they use. And I think that's equally important with any school districts you want to partner with. I always look at it from the perspective of there are lots of opportunities for teachers and school administrators and districts. The question is, what do we who want to help them accomplish this have to offer to help them solve their needs?
Thank you. I have two questions. One of them is, how do we clone Juanita? The other is there any spillover effect from all of this on community colleges or higher education, or is that just still untouchable grounds?
No, that started down at the university and college level. That's starting because they're going to have to deal with changes in credentialing processes. because, for example, at the high school level, earth science, which has for quite a while been sort of a backwater in high schools and was not considered a high quality science by the UC system, that's changing. Earth science, so there are shifts like that that are being caused by this new take on these new standards, and that process is starting. There are conversations with the Teacher Credentialing Commission, which means you bring in the UC and CSU systems. So it's just a slow, long-term process.
Yeah, I'm just curious. It seems to me that central to all this at some point is serious staff development, which sounds like what you're doing. And I'm wondering if you're aware of resources for funding for developing staff along these lines.
Well, there's been a big transition in that too. If we brought somebody in from the County Office of Education, well, first of all, there aren't that many people there at the County Office of Education to help at your school district, right? At the district level. But if you brought them in, you would find out that there has been a major shift. If you're familiar with the shifts that were caused by the local control accountability plans and the local control funding formula, the decisions about the use of professional development funds are really done at the district level. So those are district level decisions. That's where most of the money is now.
So the funding sources, if you're interested in the LCAP plan, is Title I funding. So if at a district level, that's where you were looking for it. In our district, in order to help to supplement that, like I said, we have this Generation STEM secondary grant, and that it's not really a grant. It's a continual funding source that we're trying to move forward, and it's done through private partnerships. So as a public-private partner, we would be the public end, and the private partner would help us to fund those pieces. And so part of what we're doing has been supplemented, and it's truly been supplemented and not supplanted, which I think is also hugely important. So you've got both of those funding pieces as well.
Oops.
One more? Is there time for one or two more? As curious as I am about the resistance to environmental education over the years, because I think some states may not be as far along as we are, and they might face a similar fight in the coming years. I'll let that go for now. I seem to even remember a Claremont Institute that developed a report in the late 90s that was very much against environmental education. I don't know who Claremont Institute is, but I'm more curious about EEI and teacher training and what a group like Sustainable Claremont could do to inspire teachers to take part in EEI.
Well, I didn't really touch EEI, did I, after spending 7 years on it? Because there are two parts to it. One is the history social sciences units. There are 45 of those, which are still on, I know this is just touching your question, but which are still on standard. And if you look at the new history social science framework, a number of the EEI units are actually specifically mentioned in there as guidance to the teachers. Here's some standards-based State Board of Ed approved materials you can use to support this instruction. The 40 science units, on the other hand, are not NGSS. They were built with a number of specific limits. First of all, they were built to the 1998 science standards. And so we're in a very different place with the next generation science standards, but they offer tremendous resources. There are connections in there that you can find, and they're an incredible resources. I like them. They're just not on standard anymore. But they're tools for the teachers. And they're a way to give teachers an easy step in. I think that's the critical thing. The units were built to be that teachers could implement them on their own. So I haven't ever seen it as a professional development problem for teachers. It's a matter of exposing them to what they are, how they can be used. And so the difference is this history, social science units can be used as is. They were approved for that use by the state board. And the science units are really incredible resources now. Anything from maps to instructional technological reading materials are good. There's all sorts of good stuff in there, but it has, because of some of the shifts, if you take an example, lovely one, decomposition, which was a 4th grade science standard, now is at the 5th grade. So there are shifts like that that have to be taken into account and adjusted to. But it's also different because it really was built at a time when we were not being allowed to require the teachers to take students outside. So that's another major transition now in this framework. Get them out, get them doing real things. So I hope that helped. You still have a question?
Can I follow up? Is there a plan to correlate EEI with NGSS?
Not right, to build new units?
Yeah, to build new lessons plan, new units.
No, not at the moment.
I have a question. It seems to me that science would just play an equal role with something like environmental justice or economics. If you take air quality, for instance, there's local air quality where we have smog and all of those problems. And on a global level, we have carbon dioxide buildup in the atmosphere, which becomes a global problem. The same sort of issues with water and how this might affect local communities as well as statewide and national, and the implications of all of those. How much of that is done and how much resistance is there to it? I can see there might be huge resistance for people that just don't like to talk about these things.
Oh, I think it's lack of knowledge. I think if you asked Juanita or me, how long have you been working on this now, Juanita? I mean, I think I look at it as a 5 to 10 year change process. What do you?
Yeah, we're on year 3
Yeah.
of the change.
And
But
so
I would say that to go along with, I think what you're saying is that I haven't seen a lot of, so the one controversial, which isn't really controversial, issue that sometimes you run up against some resistance when it comes to environmental ed is climate change, and that humans are the cause of climate change. But the way the NGSS performance expectation is written, it's written as an exploration of evidence that scientists have used to support this climate change argument. And the only piece that I've seen that has been at all an issue is teachers and their ability to use raw data. So going back to that professional development piece, when you're talking about supporting an argument based on evidence and looking at the real data, those numbers don't look like they came out of the math book. They're not like nice, friendly numbers. They're like real data. And so our teachers are really kind of concerned about like, what do I do with this? And even going out and collecting that data, like mean temperature kind of data, again, it's like, what do I do with this? It's not so much the like controversy of how it fits in and whether we're causing it, but more like, okay, I'm seeing something and I don't know what to do with it because I've never been asked to do anything with this before.
So I think the importance of academic scientists and other scientists to help teachers even understand what would arguing from evidence look like in reality. For example, how do you analyze evidence?
And so to piggyback off of his question, it's like, what role does sustainable Claremont, good sustainable Claremont kind of, and like any organization like this, how can they help is in professional development, it's that piece. Providing that expertise, especially if you have like time to volunteer, getting into talking to the right person, whoever it is in the district that's planning, that's actually doing the work. because there's lots of people that are at various levels that get credit for work, but the person that's doing the work, like find that person, seek them out, and listen first to what their goals are, and then see how you can interject yourself into those goals, because I think it's an easy interjection. It's just.
Anything else? Well, thank you very much for.
I don't think you answered my question. Wait, I don't think he answered my question. That was my question. You were just asking questions. That was my question.
Well, I was going to ask another one, but I didn't think I should, and that is, what do you see Claremont should be doing, and in what order? Now, we've had some suggestions about that already.
Yeah, what do you see Claremont should be doing about this? In what order?
Does anybody have any thoughts about that?
The big part of that question is, how do you see this fitting into your schools? And as a school principal here in Claremont, I can say that it is fitting into our schools, slowly but surely. Can I use my teacher voice, or should we?
I've been working in the community for 15 years now, and I taught for 10 years and watched one of our elementary schools, was instrumental in one of our elementary schools becoming an outdoor elementary school, and purposefully have my 6-year-old kindergartner there exploring the biomes as she goes through Oakmont, and was part of that process and really engaging the community and seeing what the needs were of our community, and was one of the first teachers in the community here to really work with the EEI curriculum and teach that to my students in my classroom. Moving over into an administrative position, I hear a lot about the professional development and the need to kind of have some training on this and to know what the resources are. But there are some great community partnerships. We are partnering with the colleges right now. Our students, my 5th grade students, are in week 8 of a week 9 partnership with the Bernard Field Station and the environmental education class with students there. They're working consistently in their outdoor classroom and having a good time with that. But it takes people who are going to champion that, and it takes people who are going to be passionate about that. But it also takes some of that freedom that you were speaking of earlier, that focus of that math and science, math and language arts, and how are we going to pass these tests? We're starting to see teachers come out and say, well, now that I have the freedom to really engage and integrate my curriculum, what are the resources that are there? So a little bit of that freedom from teachers to step out of that box of standardized testing and say, how can I implement this? And we are seeing that happen. So it's exciting to be part of that community and to be a leader in that and bring people along in the way. So, it is fitting into our schools. We still have work to do, but we're on the right path.
Good.
Thank you. One more question? That's wonderful.
It's supposed to be an answer. I just want to ask.
How can we help you?
That's a good question. That's a conversation that Peg and I have been having, and bringing it back to the teachers, because I have all kinds of ideas, but if it's not going to fit for the teachers, then it's not going to ultimately get to the students. So we've been having those conversations on a district
Level. We've got some great TOSAs that are doing some good work and some EEI training for teachers, but engaging that in a larger scale conversation. April's a hard time to have that conversation with teachers because there's a lot on their plate. So, but the conversations are happening, and the good news is I know her. So when we have those answers, I'll be able to get them out to you.
Thank you. I don't think we can close out the evening without having the superintendent of schools say a few words.
Dr. Lieberman, thank you so much. You've given us a lot of food for thought, and it's just exciting to look at what we've been doing. We have where we need to go. And so, as Natalie said, it really takes champions like Natalie and leadership at the school sites to ignite that passion in our teachers. And we definitely have pockets of teachers throughout the district that are excited about this initiative. So, Juanita, Claremont Unified School District, we need you. So, we'd like to steal you right over. So let's talk after this meeting. But thank you
Just
both
make
for-
her available to present with me sometime.
I can do that.
I'll help you on that.
Right, okay. So thank you both for a great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Are we here? Yeah. I want to thank you all for coming. And, you know, I think, yes, I'm getting there. We have some sign-ups here because I know some of you are active in some of the Sustainable Claremont action groups. Some of you know people who should be active in Sustainable Claremont action groups. And in particular, if you are or you know someone who should be active in the schools action group, would you please let them know about your experience this evening and how they should join up with us, that you can access that through the Sustainable Claremont website. And we have sign-ups right here. We have to verify how many people were here, okay? But we also, as you now know, we need the community's help. This is not something the district can do all by itself. One of the goals of Sustainable Claremont and the Schools Action Group is to have Claremont be an exemplar of collaboration between the city, a nonprofit organization like Sustainable Claremont, and the school district, and putting ourselves on the map of how to do environmental education the right way where everyone's involved. It's everybody's business. It's just not the school district's business or the city's business or Sustainable Claremont's business. So please think about that and share with your friends and your family and anybody else that you run into on the street. And you're coming to Earth Day, I'm sure, on Saturday, right? Shake your heads. Of course, I'll be there. If you know of community resources beyond what Juanita mentioned, just take your little ballpoint pen and scribble it down here. If you have any other ideas on what partners can do in terms of supporting the school district, you can write those down. If you are curious about the Environmental Education Initiative curriculum that was mentioned by Jerry and by Natalie, you can Google it, Environmental Education Initiative California, or EEI California. If you just do EEI, you're going to get all kinds of interesting things, none of which will be what you need. You need to put the California on the back of that. But it's interesting for community members to check it out. It's extremely rich. But as Jerry said, there's so much more to be done. This is a starting point. So thank you again for all being here.